Hi folks, this is Kimberly with Lickety Stitches 3 Sisters block of the month. This month we're working on block 6, Laurel Wreath, and it looks like this. We are going to follow the cutting instructions with a few exceptions. For block B, we are going to cut that square at 4 3/4 instead of 4 1/4, and that just gives us some room to trim. For block C, we're going to cut 2. You can do 4 1/2, and that gives you a little bit of room to trim. 4 3/4 would give you quite a bit of room to trim, so that's up to you. Cut block F the same block size as block C, 4 1/2 or 4 3/4, depending on how confident you are with your half square triangles. And block G, we also want to cut 1 at the same size as that block C. So again, block C, F, and G, we're going to make half square triangles using that sew around all 4 sides method. So we're going to cut 2 of block C and then 1 each of F and G, and they will go together. I am going to pause to get my pieces cut out, and I will be back. Alrighty, we're all cut and ready to go. So I've got my center A cut at 3 1/2 by 3 1/2. I have my B fabric that I cut at 4 3/4. And then you bisect it twice to get 4 triangles. I have my C fabric, 2 4 1/2 or 4 3/4, depending on how much room you wanted to trim. Let me back that up a little bit. There we go. And then I have my F and G fabric. And these we have not subcut because we are going to sew around the edges to make half square triangles. Sew around the edges to make half square triangles. I have my D fabric. No subcuts needed, just like the pattern. I have my E and H fabric. Now these are 2 different colors in the pattern. I chose to do the same, but we do subcut these on the diagonal both ways, so we get 4 pieces out of each. So if you had different colors, you would have 4 of each. I have my J units cut according to pattern instructions, 4 1/4, and there are 2 of those, and we cut them in half twice to make 4 triangles each. And then I have my corner units, my I units, and of course those are not subcut. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to the machine, oops-a-daisy, and I am going to start with those half square triangles. We're going to sew all the way around and then cut them in half and square them up. So I'm going to pause to go do that. I will be back. Okay, so we have sewn around the edges of our square units, around all 4 edges. We're going to open those up. And you guys are all used to this now. I don't know about you guys. I am really looking forward to the sewing machine clinic because I'm starting to get weird tails again in the machine, and my thread cutter stopped working randomly, and I didn't realize how much I relied on that until it doesn't work. So forgive my little messy sewing there, but I'm really looking forward to that clinic. And then we're just going to open them up and press them. And if you are doing this right, you won't finger press. You will give these just a little squish. And so this weekend at class, we did block 5 again, actually, because the folks who were there, that's where we were at. But just a couple gentle reminders from that. A good fresh rotary cutter blade makes everything so much nicer, as does using the same ruler when you're cutting. So we were talking again about how oftentimes if you switch rulers, you might find there's a slight difference in the measurements, and that can really throw you off. So we are going to trim these squares up to 2 5/8. So 5/8 is going to be just 1 hash mark past your 1/2 inch line. Half is 4/8, 1/8 more. I like this ruler. Rulers like this because it has the corner squares every 1/8. So I'm going to line my diagonal up along the center, making sure I have room to trim. So it's going to want to go up a little bit more. And I trim both sides like that and then rotate it. And I'm going to line that right up on my 2 5/8 here, my 2 5/8 there, my 2 5/8 there. Make sure it's not going to wiggle on me, and trim it out. And I know some folks like to trim one side and then another side, and they do all 4 sides separately. I just think that's so much more accurate to do 2 sides, flip it, and trim it. So we're going to trim all of our half square triangles up to 2 5/8, and then I will be back. Okay, before I talk about these pieces, on our half square triangles, I made myself a note dimension, and then I didn't. So we are actually going to press these specifically. We very rarely do, but these, it is nice if they line up. So on one half of them, press them towards your background, whatever color that would be, or your darker color, your star point color, color C. And on the other half of them, press them towards the F and G fabric. So on these, my fabric C is this darker color. And on this half, I've pressed it towards fabric C. And on the other half, the other set, I pressed it towards the F or G, whichever one it is, fabric. So at this point, if you want to go back and repress half of those triangles, it'll just make them line up a little bit cleaner. So we're going to start building from the center out. Yes, that's selvage edge. Yes, I use selvage. No, I don't even feel a little bit guilty about it. I know it's Coulter 101, but yeah, that's fine. So, nobody's winning any prizes for my quilts. I'm not winning any prizes for my quilts anyway. So we're going to press this in half both ways because we are going to be lining up points. So when I press it in half, I get these nice lines. And then I'm going to take my fabric B and I am going to line it up with my center line on the point, line it up on here, and so, and I'm going to do each half, open them up, press them out, and then line the other half. And then because we overcut these, you can see they are really overcut, but we're going to come back and trim them down, and that will help us to not lose our points in the end. So I'm going to go do that, and I will be right back. Okay, I'm going to show you how I square this up. It's going to come out to 4 5/8, which is a weird thing to square up because the center line here, where we would normally say, okay, line your center up on 3 inches, is going to be like in the center of the 1/8 marks. It's actually a 16th measurement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my point here at the edge, and I'm going to line my 1/4 inch line up with that, and I'm going to make sure that some line on my ruler runs right through the middle of my diagonal so that I know I'm cutting straight, or that at least it's going to end up straight. So when I have my 1/4 inch line on the very tip of that point and a line running through the center that way, so I have a good horizontal reference, I'm going to take that cut. Now, I'm going to turn it over, and we are squaring up to 4 5/8, so it's 1 past the center mark. I'm going to line that up on the line I just did, 4 5/8, and we're going to wiggle just a little bit over. And I'm going to line my 1/4 inch line up here. And if this is a little bit off, if you're actually getting to 4 3/4, you're going to be okay. That 1/8 of an inch is not going to hurt you terribly. That 1/16 of an inch is not going to hurt you terribly on either side. So what you're really wanting to make sure is you have a 1/4 inch on this side and a 1/4 inch on this side. So my 1/4 inch line here still matches up. I still have a 1/4 inch from the inch I just trimmed to the edge. And I am coming in just a little bit long. I'm not going to cry about it. I've got my 1/4 inch here. I'm concerned about preserving my points. And I'm going to take that trim. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now I have my top and my bottom turned flat, so I can line this bottom up, make sure I have a 1/4 inch here, and I'm going to take my cut, I'm going to flip it around, line up my bottom with a true edge, and I'm going to come in just a hair shy of 4 3/4. It's the 16th. Like I said, you're going to be just short of that 3/4 inch line. Make sure, what you really want to make sure is you're preserving your quarters. So you got a 1/4 inch on the point here, a 1/4 inch on the point here, and square up. So you can see how very, very little room that was for squaring, which is why we took that square B up to 4 3/4 from 4 1/4 to give us room on either side. Granted, I'm sewing with this denim fabric, so it's a little bit thicker in the seams, but I think you'll be happy because now you have preserved your 1/4 inches and you won't lose your points on either side. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set that aside, and we're going to put together these units here. So I'm going to lay out my half square triangles because they're the same all the way around. So I want my C fabric facing out. My C fabric facing out. So I am getting, well, let's face this to you. I'm getting a V here, and my star points, what'll end up being my star points on this side. This is the same all the way around if you used alternating fabric. So I am just going to line those up, one on top of the other. One on top of the other. And that way when I'm sewing, I don't end up with diamond units. And don't tell me how I know that will happen, because then I'd have to tell you that I've done this and unsewed it a couple times. So if I line these up like this, I'm going to go to my sewing machine just like this. Holy buckets, you can see that shelf, that mess in the background here, that's my fabric shelves that desperately need to put together right the right way. Again, I was digging for something, so ignore the mess. Anyhow, I'm sure you know your rooms are perfect and you never ever dig for fabrics and leave a mess on your shelf. So I'm going to go ahead and sew these together, right sides together. We're going to sew all 4 units, and this is where, hey look, the seams nest since we pressed them the other ways. If you haven't done that yet, go back and do it. And then, once those are done, eek, I'm going to take my D fabric, and on 2 of those I'm going to create 2 long units by sewing those onto the end. So I'll have 2 short units and 2 long units, and I will be back. Okay, so we've got 2 short units and 2 long units. We're going to assemble these to the center. We're going to add our short units, and then we're going to add our long units. I panicked for a second and thought I had sewn the V's upside down, but I didn't, and I could just flip them because we haven't sewn them to anything yet. So we are going to go ahead and get those sewn together and then come back and assemble the corner units. This block goes together really nice, really fast. And you know I had to do this on video because this never, ever, ever happens. This should come out at 9, and it came out exactly at 9. So we're going to trim this up to 9 inches square, and we are going to work